Hey everyone, welcome back to Note to Shelf. It is now February. January went by really quickly, but I thought today I would show you all that I read in January. Not a whole lot, a grand total of 5 books, but they were pretty good books, and I thought I would share them with you today. And I'll just get right into my list. Okay, first up in my list is A Magical Girl Retires by Park Soyeon. I think I was just browsing on the Barnes and Noble website when I saw this book. I think that's how I found it. Anyway, and I thought it sounded so interesting, and I thought it was so fun to see two of my interests coming together. Not that I watched a lot of, magical girl anime growing up, but I do watch anime. And to see that kind of referenced in something that wasn't manga, I thought was really interesting. So it piqued my curiosity. This was the first book I read this year, and it's a really short read. I think just under 200 pages. Yeah, 154 pages. So really short. We read it in just a day, and it was pretty good. I guess I'll go ahead and read the little summary for you. A millennial turned magical girl must combat climate change and credit card debt in this whimsical and wildly imaginative ode to magical girl manga. 29, depressed and drowning in credit card debt after losing her job during the pandemic, a woman decides to end her troubles by jumping off Seoul's Mapo Bridge. But her attempt is interrupted by a girl dressed in all white. Aroha, the clairvoyant magical girl, is on a mission to find the greatest magical girl of all time. And our protagonist just may be that special someone. But the young woman's initial excitement turns to frustration when she learns being a magical girl in real life is much different than how it's portrayed in stories. It isn't just destiny, it's work. Magical girls go to job fairs, join trade unions, and attend classes. And for this magical girl, there are no special powers and no great perks. And despite being magical, she still battles with low self-esteem. Her magic wand is a credit card, which she must use to defeat a terrifying threat that is neither monster nor intergalactic war. So yeah, given that this book is about magical girls, it's full of action and is lots of fun. Because of all the action, it does feel kind of fast paced, which might bother some people, but I feel like it made sense given how short the book actually is. But I don't think it was rushed at all. And, despite being fun and whimsical, it still touched on some deeper, darker topics. Our main character struggles with depression and low self esteem. And, like the summary said, being a magical girl isn't all fun and rainbows and sparkles all the time. You know, it's work. So I think for me, like what really drew me in was how relatable the main character was. I feel like I could relate in a way to her situation. I felt like I'm kind of in a similar space mentally. I thought it was interesting because it showed us that magical girls don't have it all figured out. They struggle just as much as any other person does. And then this book touched on how these girls are magical because of their struggles. It's their struggles that help them grow and to become stronger. They're all just trying to find their place in life, even if they make mistakes along the way, and it kind of shows you that it's okay to make mistakes as you go. So, in a way, I found it to be kind of motivational without being super, preachy or like super like self-helpy in that kind of way. This story even touched on climate change because in this book it turns out that the big terrible thing that will cause the end of the world, it's not aliens or monsters or robots or what have you, it's climate change. And so it's funny in the way it kind of subverts your expectations on how the world is going to end. But also, like, that is a very real thing that we experience in real life. And so, it just added to the relatability of the story and the idea that even you, an ordinary girl or person, I guess, can be a magical girl too if you just put your mind to it. But yeah, it was short, sweet, and fun to read. And I do like how you take. I love how when you take the dust jacket off, um, the picture is still on the cover itself. And I think that's really cool, and it's a really well done picture. It's really pretty. But anyway, so like it wasn't necessarily anything absolutely amazing, but like it's a nice little story that I found motivational, and it's just a good read, especially to start off the new year with. So yeah, that was A Magical Girl Retires. I don't know what I'm doing. The next book that I read in January is The Man Who Died Seven Times by Yasuhiko Nishizawa. This one was a lot of fun. I read the first two chapters and was immediately hooked. And I thought it was fun because I happened to be reading this book on the 2nd and the 3rd of January, which is when this book takes place. It takes place during the main character's New Year's family celebration. I saved it for New Year's. That was the reason. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So our main character has this condition where every now and then he gets stuck in a time loop. A single day becomes a time loop for a total of 9 loops, including the original. And for each loop, he's the only one who is aware that the day is repeating itself. And so, if he wants to, he can change how the day turns out by making different choices. It kind of influences what other people do, or he could do nothing. And then the day, it will just repeat like it did in that original loop. But, he can, do whatever he wants, but whatever he does on the 9th loop will become the official version of that day, even if it's different from the first loop. I hope that makes sense. It makes more sense when you read it. But it's a very interesting concept. Our main character, he has experienced this for as long as he can remember. And because of that, it does get old after a while. Repeating the same day 9 times in a row and having this happen like every month, his entire life. His life is like twice as long in a sense compared to everybody else's. So it gets tiring after a while, and I thought that was a very realistic way to view this situation. But one day on his family's New Year's celebration, while he's there, his grandfather is killed. Now, luckily for them, this happens to be the day where our main character falls into his time loop condition once again. And so now our main character has the chance to try to prevent his grandfather's murder from happening. And, seeing kind of like all the changes he makes every time to try to figure out like what is the best possible solution. Reading this book, you definitely get that classic whodunit feel while reading this. Mystery is my favorite genre, but I specifically really like the whodunit types of mysteries, so that was a lot of fun. And it was also interesting our main character going through these different loops at the family gathering. And so now he is getting to see different sides of his family. Making different choices can cause other people to react differently. So we get to see, different sides of his family members that he wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I thought that was a fun thing to explore. Yeah, I thought this was a very unique take on the whodunit genre. Assuming like me that you haven't read other stories like this. I don't know if there are other stories like that. I would be interested to know if there are. But yeah, it was a really fun read. Really, scratched that mystery itch in me. But yeah, that was The Man Who Died Seven Times. The next book I read, I don't have the physical copy of it. I borrowed the ebook from my library, but it is the second book of the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series called Tales from the Cafe. And if you haven't read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I would recommend it. It's a very cozy kind of book. Somewhat slow paced, but if that's what you're looking for, it's a nice read. The idea is that there's this cafe you can go to that gives you the chance to go back into the past. There are different rules set in place that would prevent most people. Like, one of the rules is that no matter what you do in the past, nothing you do will change the present. So it's interesting to see what leads these characters to still go into the past despite knowing that they can't change the present. These stories explore a lot of different emotions like regret and grief and hope for the future. It's just very heartwarming to read. And the second book is just more of the first book. I will say personally, I do think I like the second book better. Maybe I just read it at the right time, I guess. The stories in this book all dealt with grief and losing a loved one. But more than that, the characters blaming themselves for their loved one dying, or not being there for their loved one when they should have been, and blaming themselves for that. And, through going into the past, learning that it's okay to be happy. You can allow yourself to be happy after losing a loved one. I liked how through each of the 4 chapters, this was the common theme. I think in the first book, each chapter was slightly different. Not everyone died. There wasn't always a dead loved one in the first book, but in the second one, it dealt with death and grief and blaming yourself and all that. For me, I think it hit a little closer, especially because last year I did lose a loved one. It was a pet, but I still really felt that grief, and it made me think of life in general and how we are not guaranteed forever. I'm still young now, but my cat was a senior cat, and I have my grandparents. They're not going to be around forever, and so I've been reminded that life doesn't last forever. And I I know that. I think we all know that. But I realized that I think I was taking it for granted. I've known, these pets or these people for most of my life, and they're just a part of my life, but they're not going to be a part of my life forever. And it just kind of opened my eyes to that fact. And it hurts, it does, but I think it helps to be aware of that so that we don't take it for granted. But yeah, so I think this book, I guess, felt more relevant to me at the time that I read it. If I had read it around the same time that I read the first book, I don't think it would have had that much of an impact on me. I definitely recommend this series of books if you're looking for something calm and cozy, but still thought provoking and full of emotions. Yeah. So the next two books are the ones that I read in my last video for my lowest and highest rated books in my TBR. The first one I read out of those was Tomb Sweeping, and just to keep it really short, Tomb Sweeping, it's a collection of short stories. I was surprised by how, for me, I felt like this sense of eeriness. There was something in each story, well, not every story, but in a lot of them, there was just something about what was happening that was a bit unsettling, which surprised me, but I didn't necessarily hate that. That, I think, is what made these stories interesting for me. Also, for a lot of the stories, I was constantly trying to figure out, why is this character doing what they're doing? Why do they think this way? What's going on? And on the one hand, I enjoy it when a book makes me think, it kind of challenges my brain. So I do enjoy that on the one hand. But on the other hand, I did wonder if it was intentional or not, since it happened with a lot of the stories. And I think because of that, I can understand why some people might not like these short stories. But if it's at all interesting to you, I definitely do think it's worth checking out. Yeah, so that was Tomb Sweeping. And then the last book I read for January was The Woman by Kristen Hanna. This book's pretty long. It's just over 400 pages, but like it took no time at all getting into the plot. From the first chapter, the character is already getting her call to action, and we follow her as she volunteers to be a nurse in the army during the Vietnam War. And we see her get to Vietnam and then find that, well, this is not at all what I was expecting it to be. I don't really know what she was expecting, but you could tell like she was not expecting it to be so scary. Like, even before she landed in Vietnam, like the plane was already getting shot at. What a welcome. But despite this, we see her come into her own. We see her find her passion and grow into the best version of herself. Helping other people and saving lives during this terrible, terrible war. And, that was great to see. But then in the second half of the book, we see her get back home and be treated terribly. At this point in the war, like people back home in America, we see anti war protests, we see the government and the news lying about what's actually going on in the war. And then our main character is struggling with PTSD and coming back to her old life. But because of the war, like she has been forever changed, broken even by this war. But like nobody is willing to help her, because they're either ashamed that she went to war because she's a woman, because she served in the war, people call her a baby killer. And when she tries to get help, nobody believes her because there were no women in the war. And so she, like, for years, is not getting the care and respect that she deserves. And yes, the war was terrible. Lots of people died, but she still did what she could to save lives. And, we see her struggle to try to tell people this, and even to tell herself, that it's okay, to be proud of what you've done because you did good, even if nobody else believes in you. And we just see her struggle with her shame and the PTSD. And one thing, like, I don't have the same experiences as our main character in this book. Hopefully, I will never have to go to war, but I was still able to empathize with and sympathize for our main character because the feelings that she feels are so inherently human. And I think as a character, she was written so well, and I found that to be a mark of very good writing. So I would definitely recommend checking out this book if you have not already. Okay, so that was all that I read in January. Not a whole lot, but I think a very good selection nonetheless. Yeah, so do let me know if these reviews were helpful at all for you, or if not, what I could do better. And also, let me know if you've read any of these books and how you liked them. And also, if there were other books that you've read that you would like to recommend in the comments below, I would love to hear them. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope I made sense, at least somewhat. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.